Welcome to Making Chassidus Real, Part 14. Good to be back. Hope everyone had a good Pesach. And in Mirza Hashem, we'll start posting again. Maybe not every week, but from Mizman to Zman from time to time. So, today I want to just discuss an important yesod, an important foundation in the way we look at things like Chassidus. And it was sparked by a part of a sikha that I learned this past Pesach, an Achron Shel Pesach Tovshin Chav Gimel, where the Rebbe talks about the nitzchius, the eternity of Torah, and how we keep the same Mesorah and the same Torah throughout all the generations, and we have to be careful not to make new things and so on. And the Rebbe makes the following comments, that after Matan Torah, some of the Yidden made the Egel Azov. And he says, what did they want with the Egel Hazov, the golden calf? So that makes an important point. They actually, on a deeper level, weren't serving Avodah Zarah. They were actually looking for Ruchnius and Kedusha. They were looking for a spiritual experience. They were looking for a holy experience, because we know that Chazal tell us that part of the reason that the Egel Hazov was made was because the Yidden saw the Pnei Shor Sheba Merkava. At Matan Torah, they saw the Shor, the ox of the Merkava, the supernal chariot, a very, very high madrega, coming from the Gilui, coming from the great revelation of Matan Torah. And therefore, when Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't there, they wanted that ruchnistic experience, and they did it, and they wanted to do it through creating an egel, through which they would connect to the Shor Sheba Merkava. But the Rebbe says, their downfall was that they wanted what he calls an eigene Yiddishkeit. They wanted their own version of Yiddishkeit. Ruchnius, Kedusha, but their own version. Not exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu was instructing them to do. Not exactly what the Torah was telling us to do. And the Rebbe brings the pasuk, Sha'alo vichol v'yagetcho. You need to ask your father and he will tell you. In other words, know what the tradition is, what exactly Hashem wants from us. This is a very fascinating nakuda, because on the one hand, of course, we know Ruchnius, spiritual experiences. It could be a nigun. It could be davening. It could be anything ruchni. It's such an important part of our Yiddishkeit. And yet, it has to be in the context of exactly the way Hashem wants us to serve Him. Otherwise, it's more about an expression of ourselves than it is about serving Hashem. In my shlichus here in Sydney, I often get the question from those that are not yet shomer Torah mitzvah, but yet seeking sort of spirituality, which is very common today. And I always get the question, Rabbi, can we be spiritual without God? And kind of jokingly, I always say to them, of course you can. It's just not about being godly. And it's not what Yiddishkeit is about. In other words, Yiddishkeit is not about being spiritual. It's about being connected to Hashem. So just to break this down a little bit, just to give a few examples. We know that there's a famous sikha, the Holachta Bidrochav, where Hashem talks about going in the ways of Hashem, Mahu Chanun, Anu Chanun, just like Hashem is merciful, we should be person, and so on and so forth. And then it makes a very important point there. It's a Sikh in Parshas Ki Sovoi. Then it makes the point that the Tachlis is not to do good things. The Tachlis is to be a get l'chamensh, the Holachta Bidrochav, to go in the way of the Eibishter. This is the famous concept, which is exactly what the problem was Shaul HaMelech, who wanted to keep the animals alive because he wanted ruchnius. He wanted a ruchnistic experience. He wanted to be a korban. So many of us have learned in Chassidus the greatness of a korban. Raza the korban, oilad raza the insaf. A korban is such an unbelievable thing. So Shaul HaMelech wanted korbanis. The problem is when Hashem doesn't want you to bring a korban, that korban is worth nothing. That korban is not an expression of serving Hashem. It's a korban is just an expression of yourself. It might be ruchni, it might be a more edler part of yourself, it might be more refined part of yourself, but it's an expression of yourself. There's a very fascinating sikha in Cheluk Chafei, Parshas Vayera. If you have a look at page 79 onwards in the Kutei Sichas, where the Rebbe talks about the concept of the bittul of Avram Avinu, V'anoichi ofar v'efer, and explains what's the significance of that, and why did it say in Chazal and Gemara Soita, which we're learning now, why does it say that Avraham Avinu was zoicha to the offer of Soita and the Efer of Paraduma and so on? When he argued with Hashem about Sodom and he went out on a limb and he was moist nefesh, he said, "Offer of Efer." And then he explains a fascinating concept there with lots of things. He says there's two kinds of chesed. A person can be a person that does a lot of chesed, and chesed is always good. But yet, it comes from the fact that the person, beteva, naturally is a breita mensch. He has archava. It's coming from the fact that he's very, he'll do a lot, he'll give a lot to tzedakah, he'll give a lot of chesed, he'll do a lot for himself, he's that kind of a person, he's a harchavadika person. But that's not the real bittul, that's not the real serving Hashem with chesed. The real chesed is Avraham Avinu's chesed, which came from bittul to the Eibishter. And the difference is that when a person does chesed because it's an expression of his personality, he won't go as far to be moise nefesh, to give up himself for the chesed. Because the chesed, ultimately, even if it's good, in an edel way, the chesed is an expression of himself. Avraham Avinu's chesed came from a noichi offer of Efer, from kli bittul. It was a merkava to elokus, which is why Avraham Avinu did it in the way of mesiras nefesh. And one of the ways that's expressed is when the malachim came. And Avraham Avinu wanted to do chesed and bring them into his house, and he left the Eibishter. He said, please wait. As we know, we learn from Avraham Avinu. And the Rabbi explains that for Avraham Avinu, mesiras nefesh beruchnis was worse than mesiras nefesh begashmis. For him to give up ruchnis was harder. And yet he gave up the ruchnis, even though ruchnis is such an important thing. But he gave up the ruchnis because that's the Eibishter wanted him to go do chesed. And that's what the Rebbe is saying over here. The Egel Azov, the Yidden wanted ruchnis. But it wasn't what the Eibishter wanted. It was an Egel Yiddishkeit. So in other words, Yiddishkeit is not about ruchnis. Yiddishkeit is about serving the Eibishter. Part of that, of course, is to have ruchnis. We know the idea of Rotzu v'shuv. Rotzu is a complete leaving Gashmis, but then we have to have shuv, coming back to the Gashmistic world, to make a dir of tachtonim. A shuv without a Rotzu is a problem, because it becomes grob, it becomes not edel, it becomes very megushim. So we need to have constantly ruchnistic experiences in our life, but it's got to be the way the Eibishter wants it. It's got to be the way we were educated by the Rabbi. And I mention this because it's very common now in the world, people to make up things which are good, to make up segulis, kumzitzes. I mean, all these things are good things and have their place, but we have to be careful that our focus shouldn't be finding uplifting experiences that we feel uplifted from, but might not be exactly what we're supposed to do. Our focus needs to be and founded on and have the foundation of Kabbalah oil. What is it that the Eibishter wants me to do? It's not about what I feel good or even spiritual about. It's about doing what Hashem wants me to do, which will include uplifting experiences. It will include ruchnistic experiences, but it'll also mean that sometimes we don't engage in those things because we have to do other things based on the hadracha, based on the education and the guidance that we have from Shulchan Aruch, from Torah Mitzvahs, from our Rabbeim, and so on and so forth. Wish everyone a good day.